Milwaukee Tool came out with a new dual battery chainsaw, and let me tell you, this guy is an absolute torque monster. When you look at this saw, it is everything that you would expect in a professional saw, and something that I didn't expect Milwaukee Tool to make. 5.8 horsepower is what they say this saw comes out as, and they're saying you should compare it to a 70cc saw. Now, my problem with that is it's hard to find a 70cc saw that has a 0.325 chain. So I could be wrong. If you guys know of one that comes standard, let me know in the comments, because I couldn't find any, at least none that I have. They all have 3/8 chains. So that was one of the first things that I said, how am I going to compare this? And I'm still working on it. I'll do multiple videos on this. What I ended up doing is comparing it to Stihl's MSA 300, which is a battery operated saw, which they say is comparable to their Farm Boss series, which is a pretty nice homeowner saw. And I don't think there's a comparison here. Let's just go through and take a listen to the two saws cutting in the same piece of wood back to back. I'm sure you can hear it. The Milwaukee saw sounds like it's just absolutely ripping in. Milwaukee claims the chain speed is 14.3 meters per second. I don't know what the Stihl is, but what I can tell you is the Stihl feels like it's cutting similarly, but the RPM just is not there. And that leads me down the road of different chains and who makes the better chain, and why do I have it's an anti-kickback chain that's on the Milwaukee, and I think we can go a lot more aggressive. This is a semi-chisel that comes on it, and I was comparing it to a semi-chisel Stihl, but I still believe that there was larger chips coming off the Stihl chain than the Milwaukee chain, even though they were both brand new. It's a tough call there, because I can't just flip-flop chains back and forth, because the Stihl has 81 drive teeth and the Milwaukee has 78. So I'm going to fix that and go out and put a different chain on the Milwaukee. And I have one custom built, so we can go with a full chisel, a little more aggressive, because I believe the torque that this thing has is insane and can handle it. Now, there's two modes on the Milwaukee. There is a button in the back that you can push. You have standard mode and a high performance mode. Standard mode, 4.4 horsepower. Talk about impressive. That's going to be very, very similar to the Stihl professional saw. That's a 262. And then in your high performance mode, you're going to get 5.8 horsepower. And that's, of course, where I live, because it's just fun. And there really doesn't feel like there's a large difference between the two. And I was working on testing out battery life. Now, when we look at the Stihl, the MSA 300, the 1 AP 500S battery is supposed to be equivalent to 2 tanks of fuel. And I kind of found that to be very true while I was using it. And I even moved up on the Stihl to the full chisel, and it really performed quite well and didn't take away that much more power, which got me thinking about the Milwaukee chain. It was an interesting experience, to say the least, to deal with the Stihl, which feels like a Cadillac with a 4-cylinder. It does some great cutting. You do not push the saw. You let the saw do all the cutting, and if you push it all, it will start to bog out pretty quickly. Where the Milwaukee saw feels more like a 1972 Nova with a big block, where you don't have the comfort and the feel. The trigger's a little bit harder. It doesn't give you the gas saw feel, but she's got power, and when you get into it, it'll go. But we don't have great tires, meaning the chain, so we're still not getting that speed that we need to out of it, which I think we can fix that, and it's not going to take a whole lot. Now, I don't want to make this video incredibly long, but I think it's important to take a look at both the Stihl and the Milwaukee saws. Now, the Stihl saw is fairly light, where the Milwaukee saw is 15.1 pounds without the battery. You're looking at 19 pounds with the full battery and everything put together, which is heavy, definitely heavy. But it's not as noticeable since you're lugging around a pretty powerful saw. And if you're in the 70cc and up, you're going to be up there in weight anyway. One of the things I really like, we have a line here for felling. We also have a line going forward. And you'll notice if you look at the Stihl, we only have the drop line, not the bar line, which is interesting to me because the new Stihl MS400-1 or 0.1 is going to have both lines, so Stihl is going in this direction. There is a lot of different venting that you see on the Milwaukee, which I think is nice. You can see some of it's getting covered up in back. There's a little bit on both sides. It's nice. Chain brake is here and feels very comfortable. It's in the right spot, didn't get in the way. Same if you really compare it to the Stihl. It's a little bit different. It feels like a gas chainsaw to me rather than being so stiff. Not a big deal at all. If we turn on the Stihl, we can see there's a lot more going on. The chain brake is on. There's also a oil level indicator, so if you run low on your oil for your chain, that will go off. And then there's a temperature setting here. We also have multiple different levels that we can go to as far as like an eco mode to conserve battery, a medium, and your high. There is a tool connect area down here so you can go on, see what's happening with this, loan the tool out, lots of things that are common in tools. But it's interesting, the safety, push down on the back, you also have to push on that side button. Then you're able to turn this guy on. Trigger feels just like a gas saw, I mean just. So when we look at the Milwaukee, there's really no indication of the chain brake. It's there. I don't think that's a big deal. We have two modes. We've got full power and low. 4.4 horsepower, 5.8 horsepower. Insane. Our safety here is going to be, of course, the chain brake. Then we have this guy that rolls forward. And then we have our trigger, which I'm going to try to start it slow. Is pretty good in variable. It just isn't as smooth as the Stihl, which starts out faster, but doesn't have as much variable speed. The Milwaukee it's got variable speed. It just doesn't feel the same, and I don't think it's bad. It's just one of the things I noticed. Now, if we take a look at this quick, we have your oil fill up in front. Very similar. The Stihl takes more oil than the Milwaukee, and I think if that was something I thought was going to be a big deal, the Milwaukee still, I'm 2 times full 8 amp hours dead and full 12 amp hours dead, and I still have plenty of oil in here, so obviously it is doing well. It's about half full. I did not get any leaking. I think that is important, and the one thing that I really liked with the Milwaukee is that we have the tool in the bottom. That I don't have to carry with me. It sits in here very securely, and you slide it in, push in place, and there it is. You can get at it with gloves, not that big of a deal. You also still have a place to hang the saw, which I think is also very nice. Now, the one thing that you can kind of see down here, and I haven't taken this apart, from all the cutting I did, I was going to be very interested in what it looks like on the inside. Metal bucking spikes on both sides, and I think that is something that is pretty cool to see on a saw like this. And with the horsepower that you have, I think that it's well worth having that on here. I'm going to take this off, and these bolts are captured inside this, so it's not something you're going to lose when you're in the woods. Not horrible as far as how much sawdust built up in the time I was using it, but there was some. You'll notice there's not a lot of oil in here, which sometimes you can get from the chain splattering around. Here, everything looks pretty good. The chain did not stretch much on me, which was interesting because the chain on the Stihl was stretching multiple times, and you did have to tension it as I had 2 new chains on there. Here's our oiler that is absolutely full of sawdust, which is interesting to me. We still were getting plenty of oil. We got quite a bit in there. Our tensioner that's here, and we can change out our sprocket, which is good. I mean, there's a lot of good that's inside here. Get some of this stuff out. Protection from the saw. There's a little bit, I would guess, of scraping here. Oh, all in all, this looks pretty good, and I'm very, very impressed with how it turned out and how much power this guy has. So with the Milwaukee saw feeling so much more powerful, I wanted to move away from the comparisons between the two because I don't think it's really fair to compare a brand new, technologically advanced Milwaukee saw against a Stihl saw that came out a couple years back. And Stihl is actually due for coming out with a newer saw, and that might have the same power or similar power as the Milwaukee. So either way, I didn't think it was a great comparison, but I wanted to push the Milwaukee a little bit more. So I got out some smaller beech that I had sitting around, and I actually started using the bucking spikes and pushing the saw, and I could get it to cut out a few times if I really pushed it. And it's not how I normally cut, it's not how you should cut, but I wanted to feel how much power you had to actually put against the saw to get it to cut out, and it's significant. Then I moved over to a large tree stump that is much larger than this saw, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna kind of see how I can cut my notch and how everything goes through, to do a little practicing with it, see how comfortable I feel with it, and it was absolutely amazing. Cutting on a tree that is much larger than this saw is meant for, and it's a really hard tree that's inside here, so it was putting the saw against a lot of pressure, a lot of different things. It was quite amazing. I had some other beech to cut up, which worked out quite well. I just kept using the saw and going after an idea for you guys on battery life, which I have to say that is the second thing that Milwaukee just nailed on this saw, is the battery life. I cut more than I'd have wanted to between the 8 amp hour and the 12 amp hour, testing things out, going back and forth, and I only lost 1 bar on each battery. As I kept going, which was for multiple hours, I still got down to the point where I had just drained the 8 amp hours and got into the 12 amp hours, and it was time for a break. There's no doubt that it was just enough. The saw is so smooth, no vibrations, your hands are good, you don't have to worry about just setting the saw down while it's running in snow or anything else out there. It was just a dream to use. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, I'm sticking with gas. Well, guess what? I mean, so am I. I have much larger chainsaws than this in gas, but for those jobs that you wanna pull out, that's a tank of gas or less, or maybe 2 tanks or less, because I'll tell you, the 12 amp hours on this and the 8s that come with it do awesome. This is a great saw, an absolute great saw. This is probably the first saw that I think if you had a Stihl Farm Boss or less and you wanted to have a great saw that you were comfortable with and loved, this Milwaukee is it. And at price of $899 with 2 8 amp hour forged batteries, it's not crazily priced, especially when you compare it to many of the other saws that are on the market in gas. So you have the convenience of not buying gas, but you have the power well beyond what you're gonna get in a Farm Boss, and you're gonna get up into that 70 cc before you hit 5 horsepower, which then leads me back to, why didn't Milwaukee put a 3/8 chain on this? Don't know that. Wish I could ask, but it's probably because you want the power and you're cutting less and all that stuff. So we're looking at battery operated thin kerf cuts. Either way, we're gonna change some of this. I'm gonna do another video on that, let you guys know how that's gonna turn out. We'll do some shorts on this. We are definitely not done. This Milwaukee saw is a total beast in something I have not experienced before in a battery saw. If you are looking at battery saws and you are fairly advanced in your chainsaw works, I'm not saying you have to be a professional by any means, but don't grab this as your first chainsaw. There's a lot here, although the chain is pretty safe. You don't need this much power. I don't usually say that often. Be safe, wear your safety equipment. I think that's important. As always, I'm looking for your comments. Leave anything like that below. What do you think? Like battery, hate battery, it don't matter. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this torque monster. As always, give us a like in this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.